core argument we're looking at is that official apologies for slavery and systemic racism, they don't just fall short.
They actually block justice. That's the claim, right?
That's the claim. The sources call it metaphysical recompense, offering sorrow, offering regret.
But no actual material sacrifice.
Exactly. No wealth transfer, no institutional overhaul, and they argue that's the only thing that constitutes true reparative justice.
But, surely an apology has to be a good first step. Why do these sources dismiss it so completely?
Because it functions as a kind of a political and emotional release valve.
A release valve.
Yeah. For the beneficiaries of unjust enrichment, apologizing is a zero-cost way to manage the moral perception of their history. It lets them off the hook without ever facing the financial obligation.
So the apology itself becomes a legal firebreak. It stops a moral debt from turning into a calculated liability.
Precisely. And we have concrete examples of this. Just look at the U.S. Congress.
Right.
When the Senate passed its apology resolution for slavery back in 2009...
It had that disclaimer in it, didn't it?
It did. It explicitly included language stating that the resolution could not be used for restitution claims. It was designed from the very beginning to preempt any financial cost.
And corporations use the same playbook.
Almost identically. Aetna, Inc., when they faced pressure over insuring slaves, their response was deep historical acknowledgement.
They managed the moral risk.
They managed the risk, but completely avoided any kind of comprehensive economic redress. The pattern is clear: acknowledge history, but never, ever compensate for it.
Okay, so if apologies are the tool to avoid paying the debt, where do the sources say that original debt actually comes from?
Well, what's fascinating is how it connects back to a specific act of governmental theft.
You're talking about the post-Civil War era.
1865. General Sherman's Special Field Orders, number 15.
The 40 Acres Promise.
That's the one. It was the first real attempt at creating black wealth, what the sources call nascent capital. But it was almost immediately reversed by President Johnson.
And that land, that capital, was just transferred back to former Confederate planters.
Exactly. And that single act established a systemic failure of wealth transmission that has echoed for generations.
So what does that failure look like today in hard numbers?
The debt it's staggering. Today, the average black household has a net worth that's somewhere between $800,000 and $850,000 lower than the average white household.
Wow.
But it's not just an individual problem. The unaddressed gap has a massive effect on the whole country.
What kind of effect?
It's projected to cost the U.S. economy between $1 and $1.5 trillion in lost GDP.
$1.5 trillion.
Yes, that's a 4 to 6% penalty on the entire economy, and that's projected by 2028. Systemic injustice isn't just a moral tragedy. It's just disastrous economic planning.
Okay, that figure completely reframes the discussion. It shifts it away from subjective guilt and toward, the legal doctrine of unjust enrichment.
That's the framework. It's about calculating a liability.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, what policy could actually force the kind of sacrifice required to fix it?
And the proposal is pretty radical.
It is. It mandates a tax rate, maybe around 1.9%, but it's not payable in cash.
Right. It's paid in corporate equity.
In stock, yeah. Corporations would literally have to give up pieces of their ownership to capitalize a $1 trillion fund almost immediately.
So you're not just transferring cash, you're transferring control. Why is sacrificing control so much more important?
Because true justice requires relinquishing institutional power. You need that capital to create fully autonomous entities like a National Reparations Trust Authority or a Black Business Development Bank.
Institutions that aren't overseen by the current financial system.
Exactly. You have to sacrifice oversight to transfer actual agency.
That makes sense. And then, the sheer gap between how easy it is to issue an apology versus how hard it would be to demand that kind of sacrifice, it proves the point.
It really confirms the source's central argument that apologies are a mechanism of avoidance. They keep the old structures intact.
Which brings us to the final question, really. Given the fierce ideological resistance you'd see, how could something like this ever actually happen?
Well, the sources offer a final provocative thought on that. They suggest it might not happen by winning a popular political consensus at all.
So not through a moral awakening.
No, but through something called interest convergence. The idea that the U.S. might be forced to act out of sheer necessity.
To eliminate that $1.5 trillion penalty on its own GDP.
Exactly. To stabilize its own economy and preserve its place on the international stage. It might be financial self-interest, not conscience, that ultimately drives the change.